Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a next episode of the Ambitious Leader Chat. Every 2 weeks, we launch a new central team on our social media channels, and we are on all the normal social media channels. We are on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, and LinkedIn. And every fortnight, we launch a new central team. And around that central team, you can ask us any question you want.
Indeed. So, and the theme that we launched last week is the theme of work-life balance, a very hot topic in general over the past couple of years, something you read a lot about. At the same time, now even hotter because of the corona crisis. Everyone is sitting at home together with the children, both partners all of the time at home. Children at home, perhaps you're homeschooling your children whilst working as well. So a very hot topic.
Yes, and for me that's a proof of something that I'm already saying for several years now, that we don't have to talk about work-life balance, but that instead we should be talking about work-life integration.
Okay, then what do you mean with work-life integration?
Well, if you talk about work-life balance, then you see work and life as two separated things, two different things that perhaps even are in conflict, because otherwise you shouldn't have to balance them. But in reality, that's not the truth, because in reality, it all is happening in your own life. It's the same person who is working, it's the same person who is having a life. And it's happening all in that one life, so it should be much more like all the elements that are in your life, you should puzzle them in such a way until the puzzle fits.
Yeah, and I think, okay, because I was also thinking, yes, work and life, but the rest of your life, there are many aspects to the rest of your life. Should you balance, or should you integrate all the different aspects of your life in the same way? Do they all have equal weight, or how do you see that?
Well, it all depends on what is truly important for you. And by saying this, I actually refer back to the last Ambitious Leader Chat, where we were talking about finding your purpose, because then you also find what is truly important for you. And those things that are truly important for you, of course, you have to make them a priority in your life. If, for example, it's very important for you to build a career, then work will probably be a big piece of the puzzle. If being a very good father or mother is a very important thing for you, then parenthood will be a very big part of your puzzle. If you are training for a marathon and you really want to be the best marathoner ever, then running will be a very big part of your puzzle. So it all depends on what is truly important for you.
Okay, it's a decision that you make. What is important to you? Of course, sometimes there might be a bit of a conflict because you find your family very important, but also work is very important to you. And also sometimes an employer might not be as open to you making your family a priority. What are your thoughts about that? Do you think it might change now?
Well, there are indeed a lot of elements that we want to put in our lives, but we can't put everything in our lives. And there's a nice way to imagine it for yourself, and that is looking at it as a 4-pit burner. And you only have enough electricity or gas to let 3 pits burn. Then you will have to make choices. And if you want to put all the elements in your life, then it will become very, very hard. And if employers are not open for those choices that you make, then probably you're not working in the right spot, because you make a choice that is very important for you. For example, you want to be a marathoner, you want to spend a lot of your time on running, and it's absolutely not supported by your employer. Well, then perhaps you should find another job.
Yeah, okay. Earlier, or a couple of days ago, I was chatting with someone, and the concept of bring your kids to work popped up. What are your thoughts about that? Do you think it's something that people perhaps should even integrate a bit more now? while they are at home in this period? And perhaps can it also lead to doing this more and more on the job?
Well, in this corona crisis, it's not really about bringing your kids at work, but it's much more bringing your work to your kids. And the concept itself of bringing your kids to work, it's a very artificial concept. But it can be fun, of course. It can be fun for you as a parent. It can be fun for your colleagues. It can be especially fun for the children.
The children as well, yeah.
So it's a good thing, absolutely. But at the same time, why keep it so artificial? And shouldn't it be a normal integration? Because parenthood is probably a very big part of your life. You made a conscious decision to become a parent. It's not suddenly that you wake up in the morning and suddenly there's a child in front of you. So you made that choice, and then you have to also be ready to take the consequences of that choice. So if you want to integrate that parenthood in your life, then of course it's a very big part of your puzzle, and it's part of who you are. So also your colleagues should take it into account. Your employer should take it into account. Or if you are a leader or an employer yourself, then you should also be ready to realize that the people you work with, your teammates, your employees, that they are not only working for you, that they also have another part of their life, that they're also a parent, that they also have children, that their children perhaps sometimes even need attention too. And especially in those extreme situations where you are working from home and you know that the kids are also at home, well, yes, indeed, then it can happen that sometimes you are in a video conversation, for example, and suddenly there is something happening behind you.
Yeah.
I think back on that well-known BBC journalist where he was giving an interview, and suddenly the children and the wife were running around behind him, and we all laughed about it, and it was a bit of a weird situation. But at the other hand, why is it a weird situation? If you're working from home, then things like that can happen. And, well, perhaps we laugh about it because we recognize it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. At the same time, you also mentioned making those choices, and certainly now in this situation that we are in. One of the things that I read, a headline that I read earlier today actually, was that this might lead to an increase in the wage gap between men and women, because women might make that choice even more than before again to, in this situation, look after the children.
Well, I hope it will not result in a bigger wage gap, because I think it's totally wrong. And, well, eventually someone has to take care of the children, and also someone has to work to bring financial things, financial means to indeed to support the family and life, and you can't do both at the same time. And if women make those choices, well, it's fine for them. But I can also imagine that there are men making those choices, and I think it's absolutely wrong in society to assume that women will make those choices more. Probably there are also a lot of dads that I know that really want to make that choice, and they have to stand tall to make those choices too. Because why would a man be more driven in a career and a wife be more driven in child's care? It doesn't need to be like that.
Okay, absolutely. I completely agree. Perhaps let's move on to a next topic. And because we've been talking about the work-life integration, but what if you are very often in a changing situation? What if the situation changes? Because I can imagine that you have a certain way of organizing your life, integrating the different aspects. But what if your situation changes?
Well, there are two aspects to that. If your situation changes on a regular basis, like for example, if you travel a lot, then you have a home situation and you have a traveling situation. That's one part of the story. The other part of the story is, what if the situation changes very sudden?
Yeah,
And very
like now.
dramatically. Like, for example, now in this corona crisis, suddenly from day on day, you had to work from home and suddenly the children are home as well. That are two different aspects. The first thing, when you have different situations, well, you can actually create different systems for yourself, a different integration for system A, which is, for example, the periods that you are at home. Then you can combine all the elements in a certain way. And if you know you have to travel a lot, then you can create a different system, system B, for the periods that you're traveling, because then the integration will be different. But probably the same elements will be in your system, because that are the elements that are truly important for you. If you want to combine work, family time, and being healthy, doing sports, for example, you can integrate those three things in a home situation, and then you have a certain set of rules. You have working hours, you have sporting hours, you have family time hours, and then the time that you are traveling, you will have a system B, where the same elements are integrated, perhaps in a different way, and perhaps, or probably, with different structures. So different working hours, different family time hours, and different sporting hours.
Yeah. So that's where you have a more structured system A, B, C. But you also talked about or you also mentioned what if the situation changes overnight, if you didn't expect it, and all the systems that you've built for yourself are thrown off.
Well, then it's much more about being flexible in your own system. And as I mentioned, it's more or less the same as building those different systems. You've got system A for when you're at home, you've got system B when you're traveling, you've got system D when it's vacation or something like that. But probably the same elements will always occur in those different scenarios. Well, it's the same if something changes dramatically. Then probably you want to keep the same elements, but you have to be a bit flexible with them, a bit creative with them. For example, if that element of doing sports is really important for you, well, then I can imagine that in this moment you can't go to the gym anymore, but you can do it at home in some way. You can even combine it with your children. You can use them as a powerlifting bar, for example, and they will love it. So it really depends on what is truly important for you. Is it really about being healthy? Well, then actually it doesn't really matter what kind of sport you do. Is it more about really finishing that marathon in the best possible time? Then of course you will have to run a lot. So it really depends on the situation. It really depends on what is really important for you, and then how you can create a system around it, and how you can see the big lines actually. And finding those big lines, that gives you also a lot of flexibility to stay in a certain routine, to stay in a certain system, but with different elements.
Okay, interesting. A lot of interesting thoughts to think about. I think that's it for this week's Ambitious Leader Chat. Thank you very much for watching. We look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks, and in 1 week's time we'll launch another topic on our social media. So stay tuned and make sure to also ask us your questions there.
Thank you very much, and see you soon for another episode.
Indeed. Bye.
Bye.